Hello everyone and welcome to this edition of Top 5 here on Press TV. The United States top military commander has outlined Washington's strategy for military action against the ISIL terrorists in Syria and Iraq.
Our military advisors will help the Iraqis conduct campaign planning, arrange for enabler and logistics support, and coordinate our coalition activities. If we reach the point where I believe our advisors should accompany Iraq troops on attacks against specific ISIL targets, I'll recommend that to the President. While this work in Iraq is taking place, we will simultaneously pressure ISIL in Syria. With coalition partners and contributions, we will begin building a force of vetted, trained, moderate Syrians to take on ISIL in Syria. This force will work initially at the local and community level and help pull together Syrians who have most felt the harsh hand of ISIL. In conjunction with that long-term effort, we will be prepared to strike ISIL targets in Syria that degrade ISIL's capabilities. This won't look like a shock and awe camp.
Dempsey also said Saudi Arabia will host training camps for anti-Damascus insurgents. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel, who was also testifying at a congressional hearing, said Washington will train and equip 5,000 anti-Damascus militants each year. He said the ISIL terrorists pose an immediate threat to U.S. interests in the Middle East. He said the terror group is using social media to recruit foreign insurgents. He demanded $500 million in extra budget to fight the ISIL. Well, anti-war protesters interrupted the Senate hearing on multiple occasions, chanting "No more wars." The protesters were forced out of the session by security forces.
Secretary Hagel. Thank you. Would you please leave? Would you please leave the room now? We're asking you nicely. We're asking you nicely to please leave the room. Look, we're asking you nicely. Would you please leave the room? Thank you. We ask you for the last time. Thank you very much.
It's the U.S.
Thank you for leaving and thank you. Goodbye.
U.S. military will not be a solution. It is counterproductive.
General Dempsey, as soon as the noise is removed from the room.
Don't drag us into another war. We had 13 years.
I'm asking you nicely to please leave the room. We're asking you again. Would you please remove this gentleman?
To discuss this case further on, let's go to San Juan and talk to Lawyer Shazdi, political analyst. Welcome to the program, sir. Mr. Shazdi, first of all, how solid and genuine is Washington's strategy against the ISIL militants?
Well, so far it's about coordinating U.S. airstrikes against ISIS targets in Iraq. They intend to, if the decision is given, to bomb ISIS targets in Syria, they say, but that, of course, is going to attract the opposition of the Syrian government if permission is not requested from Washington to Damascus. And Syria has strong allies in Russia, for instance, that would defend the sovereignty of Syria. But that in terms of Syria. In terms of Iraq, U.S. is providing air support to the Iraqi army, the Iraqi military, also other military forces in Iraq, like the Peshmerga, the Kurdish forces, the Kurdish guerrillas, or let's call it Kurdish military forces of the Kurdish autonomous region of Iraq. Now they have apparently selected 350 targets of this ISIS inside Iraq. They are continuing their campaign. They just bombed targets in the village or the town of Sadr al-Yusufiyya, only 15, 16 miles from Baghdad. So the ISIS is very close. Their aim, very close to the Iraqi capital, is to conquer it. So the U.S. is going to provide air support to prevent that. But of course, there are others, like General Martin Dempsey, the chief of Joint Chief of Staff of the U.S. Armed Forces, that said that in case of military need, he would recommend to the president, the U.S. President Barack Obama, if I remember correctly, to send troops, ground troops, to help the Iraqi military against the onslaught of ISIS. Right. The problem, of course, is that air power alone might not stop ISIS, and the Iraqi military needs to be strengthened in order to defeat this threat.
Right, Mr. Shazdi, Mr. Shazdi, the fact that the US has not included the two main players in the region, that is Iran and Syria, in its anti-ISIL coalition, for how long could this coalition last?
Well, that is a very serious problem in the US strategy. The fact that they are not including Iran, for instance, in defeating the threat posed by ISIS in Iraq. But we should consider also that Iraq is a sovereign country and Iran is a close ally of Iraq. So Iraq has the freedom to choose and ask Iran for help. And Iran, of course, is a sovereign country and can provide it if it wants to, as it has been doing it. So even if the United States would not include Iran in its coalition of the willing, let's call it like that, Iraq can. So I think that settles the matter in that regard in terms of Iranian help. In terms of Syria, well, it's certainly a backfiring policy by the United States not to request the help or the collaboration of Syria, which is the Syrian government, the one most threatened by ISIS and by other Al-Qaeda groups like the Al-Nusra Front, which, by the way, receives support from the US, from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar. And that is the problem, you see. The United States, at the same time that is preaching, is saying that they are going to destroy the ISIS, they are going to approve $500 million to train, equip, and supply the insurgent groups in Syria, which I would call them better terrorist groups, and especially the most radical ones, like the Islamics, like the ISIS, which is not the only radical group among the Syrian terrorists and insurgents. There are others too, like the Al-Nusra Front or the Islamic Front. So that is the problem, that even if they would defeat one, others will replace the one defeated. Why? Because they are receiving support from the United States. Now, maybe they are not directly receiving support, and they will not directly receive support from those 500 million in terms of training and supplies and weapons, etc. But according to sources, like one fundraiser that operates in Qatar, in this Arab Persian Gulf state, what they do, he said that what he was doing is that he would buy with Arab Persian Gulf money, which is a lot, from the Syrian insurgency, he said, quoting the New York Times, military councils. He will buy the weapons and supplies that they get from outside, and then he would resold or supply that help from abroad to groups like the Al-Nusra Front linked to Al-Qaeda, and that's precisely what might be happening with ISIS, that they might not be receiving directly the help from the United States, but some of the Persian Gulf middlemen, Arab ones, of course, wealthy Arabs, will be buying it to give it to them. Right. So we are going to see 500 million of help from the United States, that surely some of it is going to end in the hands of ISIS, and so the problem is not going to end. It's going to continue, and perhaps it's going to grow, because many people are going to feel attracted to join them, especially when there is the prestige that they're engaging the United States in the fight.
All right, I'm sorry we have to leave it there. Many thanks to Layo Shazdi, political analyst from San Juan. Thanks for your time there, sir, as always.